the winter of 1944, Allied forces broke out of Normandy, liberated Paris, and were crushing Nazi Germany from the east and west. Most of Hitler's own generals, and certainly the Allied commanders, looked at the board and concluded the fight was essentially over. They believed the German army was completely depleted and incapable of mounting another major offensive. But Hitler ordered one last desperate roll of the dice. His plan was to punch through a weakly defended stretch of the American line in the Ardennes Forest, drive a wedge between the British and American armies, and seize the port of Antwerp to cut off Allied supply lines entirely. He thought this maneuver would force a separate peace. It was a fantasy built on dwindling resources, ordered by a dictator detached from reality. Germany scraped the absolute bottom of the barrel. They secretly massed nearly 250,000 men and hundreds of newly built tanks for the assault. They moved under thick winter fog that grounded Allied aircraft, completely blinding the spotters who would have normally seen this massive force coming. On the freezing morning of December 16, 1944, the assault struck. Thinly stretched, inexperienced American units woke up to a massive armored advance tearing through the forest with total surprise. This map shows the scale of the breakthrough. The sheer weight of the attack caught the defenders entirely off guard. The German forces punched a deep westward dent into the Allied front line, nearly 50 miles wide. This sudden, chaotic tear in the lines, what history remembers as the Battle of the Bulge, threatened to split the Allied armies in two and stall the entire push into Germany. Looking at the geography of the Ardennes, the terrain is dense and difficult. Heavy tanks require paved roads to move quickly, and as this map highlights, all the crucial roads in this sector converged on one small crossroads town, Bastogne. Whoever controlled Bastogne controlled the entire offensive. American paratroopers rushed in to hold those roads, but the main German advance simply drove past them, looping behind the town. The Americans were cut off, bypassed, and completely surrounded. Inside that perimeter, it was a tactical nightmare. The paratroopers dug into freezing foxholes as snow fell. Their ammunition was running out, the weather kept supply planes grounded, and there were no reinforcements coming. Believing the situation was hopeless, German commanders sent a formal surrender demand under a white flag, fully expecting the starving, outnumbered Americans to lay down their weapons. The momentum of the entire Western Front now hinged on whether this isolated unit, trapped in a Belgian crossroads town, would break under the pressure. The American general commanding the defense read the demand and sent back a typed one-word reply: nuts. That single word defined the defense. It turned a desperate survival situation into a stubborn, immovable stand. The men in the foxholes held their lines. Through sub-zero temperatures and constant artillery shelling, the paratroopers repelled wave after wave of infantry attacks, even as they ran out of cold weather gear and medical supplies. By refusing to yield this tiny dot on the map, the defenders denied the German armor the road network it desperately needed. They choked the offensive of its fuel and bought the Allies critical time to respond. Relieved, triumphant tone. Just after Christmas, the winter sky finally cracked open. Allied air power returned in force, bombing German columns and dropping thousands of supply parachutes to the defenders holding Bastogne. Days later, General George Patton's armored forces arrived from the south. They smashed into the German flank, broke the siege, and relieved the town. Without the roads, the fuel, or the air support to sustain their push, the German advance stalled completely. By late January, the German forces were retreating east in defeat. The failure was a strategic disaster for Germany. In their final push, they had spent everything they had left. Tanks, aircraft, and experienced veteran troops were destroyed in the Ardennes, and they could never be replaced. Hitler's ultimate gamble, intended to force a peace treaty and save his regime, had instead rapidly exhausted its remaining strength. With Germany's western reserves depleted, Allied forces easily crossed the Rhine River and pushed directly onto German soil. Looking at the wider map, at the exact same time, a massive Soviet army was tearing through Poland and East Prussia, crushing the remaining German lines from the east. The war Hitler had started to build an empire was now tearing through Germany's own cities.
The country was reduced to rubble, and millions of civilians fled westward to escape the advancing Soviet army. Entire German armies, realizing the futility of fighting a two-front war with no resources, began surrendering by the tens of thousands. The advancing forces were now closing in on a single inevitable target, sitting at the center of the collapsing empire. The city where it had all begun, Berlin. The end of the regime was no longer in doubt. It was only a question of how much longer it would hold out, and at what cost. Next time, the final battle for Berlin.